Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
Drink it in, drink it in, drink it in, man.
It is picked up by the Lions. Coming back right side, 25. Picks up a block at the 30. At the 40.
Drink it in, drink it in. Drink it in, drink it in, drink it in, man.
Rolls to the right. Stafford throws deep. Got a man out there. Enzo. Caught. Touchdown, Detroit Lions. Marvin Jones.
Drink it in, drink it in.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions! Cornbread!
Drink it in, drink it in, drink it in, man.
Detroit Koolaid drinkers, what is going on? We are here on a Wednesday talking Detroit Lions football as we always do. Now, before I introduce Grifka, normally we're talking Lions recent info. We're giving you rumors. We're giving you all types of funny gimmicks and sound bits and all that. We got a totally different show for you today. So before I tell you what we're into, I'll introduce the man of the hour. Grifka, how are you, buddy?
Oh, doing good. It's nice to be back. How are you doing, sir?
Oh, it's good, man. Life is good, despite the craziness. So, what I want to do today, I barely told Grifka this just moments before we went live, but one thing we have a ton of fun on the Detroit Koolaid Cast is like we've been doing this a couple years now, which is crazy. It was just an idea from the top of my head, and had my buddy Hughes involved to start, and then asked Grifka to do it. He jumped on board, and over those 2 years, gosh, I wish I knew how many episodes we've done. A few hundred for sure. We play sound bits, we laugh, we yell at each other, we argue. We've created these fun personas because we know that you can hear the same Lions topics on all these other podcasts are out there. So we try to give you something different, and we'll continue to do that. This is no goodbye. This is no, we're not going to do that. But one thing I wanted to do to change it up is I thought we just peel back all those. No Grifka Bell today, no sound bits, no nothing. And I kind of want to interview the man known as Grifka, Mike Grifka, for those of you that probably have never heard me say his first and last name. But we got Grifka on the show. He's an integral part. He makes me laugh and frustrates me to death. But today I thought I'd just ask him some questions. Why is he a Lions fan? What are some great memories? Just across the board, I've got some things here. So, Grifka, you said you were up for this. I mean, you ready to divulge to the people why you love this football team and take away some of the fun things we do and just have a real, genuine, good Lions show today and an interview so the people get to know you a little better?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting and actually to dig up some memories on, think back, like you said, how I became a Lions fan, what I've done and why I love this team so much.
Yeah, it should be good. So everybody hang in there. It's totally different. I mean, on Friday, we're going to turn the juice back up. I mean, Grifka's going to have some questions for me. They're going to drive me nuts, and we'll do our normal fun on Friday. But a little different show today, but I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. So, Grifka, the first thing I had, I mean, it's a broad question, but we got to start way back when you were little Grifka. I mean, what's the first memory or what's your why on why you like the Lions fan? Tell me about the first time you sort of were introduced to this team or what really made you start to love football, love the Lions, stuff like that.
Yeah, probably thinking all the way back to that. I mean, just being a little kid, my dad always loved football. I mean, he played in high school, never played never went and played anything above that, but he loved football. And just being a little kid, being able to sit in my dad's lap, with my older brother on the couch and just sitting there just watching the game with him, just doing something with my dad, because I'd only see him, after work and, being little. But Sundays in the fall, when it came to it, and the Lions were on TV, we were watching them. And that was always cool. I mean, everybody hears all the crazy stories about me, breaking the coffee table glass and, punching a pillow and stuff like that. My dad never got like that. I mean, I don't know. He was just always he was more mild-mannered watching football. He liked to watch them, and, and he would just, if something cool happened, something great, he'd be like, hey, nice tackle or nice hit, or there'd be talking points. He'd be like, well, you know why they did that, and you see how they did that. And it was just, just learning the game from him. And the Lions were the local team, and, when he was younger, the Lions were decent. So I think he just kind of stuck with them at that point. So, I mean, he grew up in the 50s, and that's when the Lions, we all talk about the last, championships they won. So he remembered that stuff, but him sticking with those teams through the lean years of the, of the 70s is kind of amazing to me. But just hanging out with my dad was the biggest reason, and he liked the Lions, so that's who I picked up on.
So he saw the golden era, and then he passed it to you, and we have not had as much luck. Grifka, were you a football playing kid? Were you a Lions fan in like middle school, high school? I mean, did you rep Lions gear when you were younger? Do you have pictures of you in Lions shirts and hats and stuff like that?
Yeah, we played football. When I was a kid, I mean, we were in a neighborhood, much like probably many of our listeners, that had, big yards, or, and it was just got a group of kids together. You were playing in somebody's backyard, or if the grass was too wet and your parents didn't want you to play, you'd be playing in the street, and that was always fun, to fall on the blacktop, so we would do that. And when you came to like everybody's picking out their players, everybody, when I was a kid, either wanted to be Billy Sims. I mean, I mentioned the names Billy Sims, Leonard Thompson, and, somebody wants to be Doug English, and somebody wants to be, Gary Danielson, or, every once in a while somebody would tear out Greg Landry because, they were a little older and they remember him from the 70s. But yeah, everybody always wanted to be Billy Sims. I want to be Billy Sims. I want to be Billy Sims. And it's like where the garb I got, my parents would get, from like the local store, was just, everybody's seen the shirt that just regular Detroit Lions with the with bubbles on it. It'd be like the they never came like in black or anything like that. It was always that Honolulu blue, or like you call it, the Fugazi blue, with bubbles on, and the carnival letters of Detroit Lions, and in the silver with the white outline. I know I had that T-shirt. I don't think I have any photos of it though. And I was one of those things in the fall though, come football season, I wanted to wear it. I always kind of went with the seasons, and in the wintertime I had a Pistons T-shirt, even though I didn't really watch a whole lot of basketball when I was younger. Baseball season, a lot of Detroit Tigers garb. I know you don't like to speak about that, but it was usually sometime probably in early August I was starting to look for that Lions T-shirt, and I was probably wearing that like once a week.
Game day, I'm sure you broke it out. Do you remember, like, when you go to school, I mean, did you talk up the Lions? Did people know Grifka was a Lions fan? Did you get heat for it from people that knew they weren't winning in those years, or would have those good years and bad years? Do you remember catching any heat for being a Lions fan when you were in your younger days?
No, because like a lot of kids, they want to be, want to be pro players, and they want to be the Detroit Lions, the local team. And that's generally what a lot of people do. They'll hook on a local team. Now, I do remember some kids, they want to be different, and which is odd because I was kind of like different stuff as well, but they either like the Cowboys or the 49ers, those teams like the Raiders, and, those teams that were really good, the Steelers, and they would talk them up. And when you would go out at a recess, you would pick your players. And once again, I mean, everybody's like trying to pick Billy Sims, but every once in a while you see somebody want to be like Terry Bradshaw or Joe Montana. And Dan Marino was another one, Marcus Allen, that was another one people want to be. Tony Dorsett. I know there was a kid that was a Cowboys fan besides Chuck Dog, and he really liked Tony Dorsett, and he really liked Danny White too. But simply because he was the Cowboys quarterback. But nobody really, made fun of anybody, because most of the kids wanted to be Detroit Lions.
Now, Grifka, you named off a bunch of players. I find it somewhat humorous that you would play each other and try to be these players. I remember playing a lot of ball back in my younger days, but I don't remember like trying to be the player per se. So you named off a lot of people were calling out who they were and whatnot before they played. What were a couple players that you really latched onto, or that you were like, again, middle school, high school, maybe even those years a little bit after that? Like, who were a few of your guys and why?
When I was really young, I mean, like I said, Billy Sims, I remember his karate kick game against the Houston Oilers. Everybody, you can look up that highlight if you want. Steps on a guy's back and karate kicks a Houston Oilers guy right in the face. That's probably my favorite memory of that. And everybody loved that. But the guy I really liked when I was a kid was Doug English. Defensive tackle. I know people have heard me call his name out. The guy was just a stud, and he ultimately had to retire, for a neck injury. And when you're a kid, you really don't realize it. You just hear guys retiring. And I remember I was really sad when I heard that, because I thought he was so good, and he did like local commercials. And I remember him, he did a local Big Boy commercial. And it's so odd how that sticks in my head, how he did a local Big Boy commercial. And you ever been to the Silverdome? That was like one of the eateries there was the Big Boy. And I don't think there's a Big Boy at Ford Field. I can't remember, because I know we're never looking for that. But I remember the Silverdome had, Big Boy was one of the sponsors of them. So he did a commercial. And when I heard he was retiring, I was sad when he retired. And at that point, finding somebody else who was like really good on the team was difficult. And you ever heard that saying, you start to recognize talent as you get older? And at that point, it was those really lean years for Detroit. And you wanted to pick up on Chuck Long, but he really wasn't doing that much, and he not that great. So I was really liking guys like Dan Marino at this point. So whenever I was starting to play backyard football, if I was a quarterback, I wanted to be Dan Marino. I was a big Raiders fan at that point too. I still love the Lions, but like the Raiders were my second favorite team. They were always on TV. So I like guys like Marcus Allen and Jim Plunkett and Lyle Alzado and Howie Long. So those were guys I started to play more, simply because the Lions, they didn't have a whole lot of talent, and then obviously they got Chris Spielman. I started to like him. Saw him play at Ohio State. Even though I'm a big Michigan fan, I really liked him. And then they got Barry. So once they got Barry, everybody wanted to be Barry and really start to like him.
All right, good stuff. I'm struggling here, Grifka, to jump in on you. I know the people at home are doing their own Grifka bells when you're bringing up some of your classics. You even threw them a bone with "It's Not That Great," which I'm sure people enjoyed, even though it's a much different show today. So you named off a couple Lions. I mean, you got a couple more. You named off a few of the classics, but then you talked about the Raiders. Like, I feel like there's got to be a few other names that you normally would throw out on a show that I would laugh at, but that were your guys back in like the 80s, the 90s. Like, give us a few more of your favorites.
I really liked George Jameson. He was a guy that they got Chris Spielman and George Jameson on the team. Dennis Gibson was one of those linebackers that he wasn't like an all-pro, but he was just how you always say how he's gritty and plays really tough and hard. He was one of those guys I really liked as well. Ray Crockett, I just really liked his name. It's like you can laugh at me about that, but yeah, I really like Ray Crockett. He was good. Benny Blades, probably one of my favorite players of all time. Probably my favorite strong safety of all time. The guy couldn't catch a cold, but that guy could lay the lumber. I mean, we talk about guys now, laying sticks, but this guy could do that. On offense, I mean, that's hard. Lomas Brown. I mean, I know you make fun of him, but he was probably the number one guy in that offense. Their wide receivers were terrible. I mean, like their quarterbacks were they weren't any good. It's like my favorite highlight. People can go look this up too if you've seen it. It's my favorite one, and I know it sounds terrible because I know how bad it hurts, but Eric Hipple just getting laid out against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Every time I see it, I mean, it's one of those hits now that would be flagged. But he gets hit so hard, his helmet flies off on the sidelines, and you read now how he got a concussion from it. But it's one of those things like you cringe and you kind of laugh, and it was just so nasty. It's like that was the Lions highlights though of like those 80s teams between Billy Sims and Barry Sanders. They were so bad, and I remember hearing they had the James boys. Gary James Jones was the backfield. Gary James Jones, James boys. And neither one of those running backs was any good. And they tried to tout them. And it was just, oh, gosh, they were horrible. And what this reminds me of is that backfield when, after Nintendo came out the Sega Genesis. In the Sega Genesis, one of the games was Joe Montana football. Or it was Joe Montana football. If I remember, me and my brother used to play this all the time. And the Lions were on that game, which is odd because they generally didn't put the Lions on games like that. They weren't on Tecmo Bowl or Super Tecmo Bowl at the time or anything like that. So they had the Lions, and both of us wanted to be the Lions. And they gave a little synopsis of the team. And the first line of the Detroit Lions was slow running backs. And I think about that now and I laugh, and and they were. It's like if you went and played the game, it looked like offensive linemen running the ball. They were that slow. But we still want to be the Lions. They were one of the worst teams on that game, but still, both of us want to play with the Lions.
I need our gamers out there to hit us up on Twitter. Go to @GrifkaDKC. Were the Lions really not on Tecmo or Super Tecmo Bowl? I mean, I assume they would have to have every team on there. I mean, I remember Bo Jackson was on tackle. You could not tackle him. Walter Payton was incredible. Lawrence Taylor block everything. But I'm pretty sure the Lions had to be on there.
Maybe Super Tecmo Bowl, they put them all on. But I know Tecmo Bowl, they weren't. I think Tecmo Bowl only had maybe 8 teams or something like that, 8 or 10 teams.
Like I said, I'm not a big gamer, so we need people that know what they're talking about. But I'll take your word for it. But just because the Lions weren't in that generic guy jumping up with his finger in the air when it would say the Raiders make the playoffs, like just because you never saw the Lions probably in that screen doesn't mean they weren't on the game. I don't think, but
it's a possibility.
That's funny that you guys would play that. Now, Grifka, I want to talk about. Kind of just done some overarching, but I want to know, in your early days, we always talk on the other show and kind of laugh, and I give you a bunch of grief. You get all uptight about your fandom. What was Grifka's way of being a Lions fan, middle school, high school? You said you didn't wear a ton of gear, but you'd wear it. I mean, what was the Sunday routine for getting all hunkered down, watching the games? What are some things that stick out to you of oh, I remember this, or man, I was so disheartened when this happened, or man, it was just classic to get down, and watch the game either with your family, your friends, whoever it may be. Give us some of that routine of what it would be like, because like I said, you're the historian on the show. People know you've been watching the Lions much longer than me. You always talk about that, but what were those first little bit of, because that's when you really were becoming a fan, when you were younger and kind of week in, week out with this team, all the downs, not a ton of ups. Just kind of talk through what that was like, what you remember that you enjoyed, as well as maybe some of the frustrations as well.
When I was really young, everybody knows, Lions fans, I used to play at the Silverdome, and that's 80,000 strong. So being those lean years, I mean, if it wasn't the sellout, I mean, every ticket sold, it was blacked out locally. So being young and a little kid, 10 years, 11 years old prior, and younger, you don't realize that's what it is. Just Sundays in the fall, oh, great Lions. You'd get home from church and, you'd eat brunch really quick, or something like that. Or my parents would take us out to brunch, and it's you're almost sitting there just looking for a clock because you want to get home and watch the game. And when you get home, if they were at home and not sold out, you were like, where's the game? And you wouldn't realize it. My dad would just be like, oh, they're not on today. And so then you'd have to wait for the 4:00 start or the 10-minute ticker, as everybody remembers the old 10-minute ticker. Every 10 minutes they'd throw up all the game scores, and you'd have to see what the score was, or wait for a highlight or something like that. But generally, if they weren't on, all the neighborhood kids would get together and just go play football. That's what we would do. So it's you could look at the neighborhood. If the Lions were on, nobody was outside playing. If they were not on, everybody was outside playing. We were all playing football at somebody's house. And it was very disappointing when they weren't on. But when they were on, I remember always being so happy, and yes, the game's on today. And like I said, it was a lot of lean years, so chances are I would watch them lose. And I'd be sad. And I remember one time, when I was young, I was probably 8 or 9, and they lost a nail biter, and I started to kind of cry. And my mom told me to cut it out. stop crying. I remember that. I'm just like, heartbroken. It's like, what, Mom, you ain't got no love for this? But yes, so I don't know where it became like the obsession, of really the real highs and the low lows. I remember when they got Barry, we were happy, and they started to have some good years. And I think that's more where it was there. You start to get the frustration of like when I was a kid, I didn't get to see, a lot of good football. And then, they got Barry, they got a superstar, he's great. And like, they should be able to do more, go get a quarterback, let's, get a few more pieces, they got a good defense. And then, coming up short, losing playoff games when they would make them. I think that's where it became more of the building angst of, where I was, to the point where, like you said, kicking an ottoman across the room and screaming at the television. And that's where it became that. And in high school, though, it was just me and my friends getting to, every once in a while being able to go over to a friend's house and watch a game. Because generally it was Sunday, it was family day. You're with your family that day. So every once in a while, we had to go, see relatives, aunts, uncles, grandma, grandpa, something like that. So you didn't get to see the game. So that was one where you're like, my dad would have the game on in the car, and my mom and sisters really didn't like it, but my dad was driving. So he held the radio at that point, much like it always was. So once we got to the place, though, no matter what the score was, if we're hitting my aunt's house, my grandparents' house, no more football, because nobody else was watching football at that point. So play with your cousins, do whatever at your grandparents' house. So that was more, I don't want to say disappointing, but at that point you kind of knew the routine. I was a teenager. I was like, okay, I just got to get the score later.
I want to circle back real quick because this is much more before my time. As like I said, I don't remember the Lions not being on ever. So you're telling me like any home game that wasn't sold out, like it was just like, sorry, your local team, you have to listen to them on the radio or you're out of luck. That's how it worked. It's crazy to me. So like on a season, how many games would you miss?
Monday night games when the Lions got a Monday night game?
No.
You would wait to hear, because it was one of those things that it had to be sold out. And there was times you would hear things like the Fords bought the rest of the tickets that were left just so the game could be televised, and they would give the games to like a charity or something. They would give the tickets to a charity. And that way, they give them out. Local radio stations would buy more tickets. You'd call in, caller 14 gets 10, tickets to the Lions game. I mean, that would happen.
But how many times would you physically miss a game?
Would not sell out, and you didn't get to see it, and that really sucked.
Like how often though? Because I never experienced any of this. Every game's always been on. So like, how many games a year would you miss? Only the home games? You'd miss like 5 out of 8, or what?
You would see. You wonder why I always wanted to go to the first one. You'd always see the first one, and you'd always see like the Thanksgiving Day one. I remember a couple years, the Thanksgiving game wasn't sold out, and gosh, for some odd reason, the channel that had it would always play like Fiddler on the Roof locally. I mean, I remember it's like Fiddler on the Roof's on, and then every once in a while, you'd go to the pregame of the Cowboys game, which started at 4. It would start at 4:00 at that time, as opposed to 4:30, and they would be they'd show you the highlights of the game. And that happened a couple of years where the Thanksgiving Day game wasn't sold out, so you almost kind of had to wait for the Cowboys game to see any highlights. But yeah, when those were lean years, you'd see like the first game of the Thanksgiving game, maybe the Bears game, because the Bears were good at that time and their fans would fill it. But if they were playing like St. Louis Cardinals, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, some team that really didn't travel that well or wasn't that good, those games were blacked out. So you might miss 6 home games. I mean, I think I remember seeing just like one year, like 5 or 6 home games would be blacked out.
That's nuts, man. Hey, Grifka, did you ever get into the Silverdome? I went there once, I think, once or twice. But like I said, I wasn't either.
I don't want to say I went to a lot of games there, but yeah, I went to probably a handful of games there. Mostly with friends as I got older. I didn't go to any games with my parents, which I'm kind of sad about because I think my dad would have really enjoyed that. But it was one of those things that older, going with friends, stuff like that, and probably a handful of games. Can't remember right after. I mean, it's probably 10 or more but it wasn't like, 30 or 40. I mean, not like that. I never hit that many games in the Silverdome.
What do you remember? What did you like about that whole atmosphere and experience before they went to Ford Field?
Just it was almost more laid back. It was more raucous and more. You get 80,000 people strong, because I did go to a couple games that were sold out, and 80,000 people screaming. I mean, we talk about how Ford Field can get loud. You get 80,000 people screaming, and that's loud. And it was a little more blue collar, for lack of a better. I mean, it was out in Pontiac, and it was a little more blue collar. And the tailgates, it wasn't like now, like where you got small parking lots and you see people held up in parking garages. I mean, Silverdome had a massive parking lot, and there was all these open fields where people, they'd have like a small house and just this massive field. It's like when I used to go with my buddies a lot when I was older, and we'd park at the same spot, probably 4 or 5 years in a row. We'd park at this house on Opdyke, just a small little red brick house. And you had to, I mean, you maybe had to walk maybe a quarter mile to get over there, but it was always cool, man. It's like now people have footballs out, they have grills, and there wasn't a whole lot of, I mean, there was a police presence, but not as much security as it is down by Ford Field now. So, every once in a while you'd see you'd see a fight break out even before the game, between rival fans. I saw one between Vikings fans and Lions fans. So it took a little longer for police security to get there, because you're kind of, I don't want to say out in the middle of nowhere, but it's just so massive. But I do remember that. And then just inside the stadium, it was just like I said, just so Ford Field. Everything seems so close, where if you were up top in the Silverdome, you were so far away.
Yeah, like I said, barely been there, but like I wish the Lions still had something like that for the tailgate experience. But like you said, that building was so ridiculously big, it was crazy. Grifka, we got to keep this thing moving. I got two more for you before we take our break, and then I got some things after the break. So we want to get some more stuff on you so that people can enjoy some of your stories, memories, all that. Grifka, I know this might be hard for you, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What's your best, what's your most positive, what's your fun memory of the Detroit Lions in your earlier days?
Let's see.
Positive, good things,
My most favorite one, it sounds stupid, but it's the playoff win. And this was one of those weekends my mom had planned to go up and see my grandparents. And we're like, we're having dinner with Grandma and Grandpa. And like me and my brother, that's the playoff game against the Cowboys.
Yeah.
So, needless to say, we got voted out, but we were able to watch the game. It was actually, my grandparents actually allowed us to watch the game before we ate dinner. And just the thrashing they put on the Cowboys. And I remember at one point during that game, this sticks in my head, how John Madden said, you are looking at two of the rising teams in this league. The talent they have, the young talent they have, both of these teams are going to be around for a while. And the Cowboys went on to win 3 Super Bowls, and the Lions once again continued with their ups and downs. But that is probably my most favorite memory, that I can really remember of the Lions, and just enjoying that beatdown that they put on the Cowboys.
Absolutely, man. That's huge. A couple days ago, we joke on the show, again, with you being the historian and the longer fan than me. Like, I don't have this memory of that at all. I didn't even pick up on the team until kind of the early mid 2000s. So like, I was on YouTube the other day, and I actually went and I downloaded 6 old Lions games that I want to watch, where like that was one of them, Barry and stuff like that. So I actually got to put my eyes on some of these older games and see like the 3 receivers and some of the stuff we had back in the day. I'm looking forward to doing some of that. Grifka, this one might be easier for you before we take our break. What was your most heartbreaking, your saddest, your worst, your most frustrating moment as an earlier Lions fan? Something that you still can't get over.
And let's see, like the saddest one. Let me do 2 of them first. the first one I remember what was my saddest, like that one that made me the most angry was the thrashing that they took against the Philadelphia Eagles in the first round of the playoffs, where they ran off, this string of victories. And, the whole week leading up to this, and pundits are talking, nobody wants to face the Lions. Their offense is clicking right now. And I'm thinking, they're going to go to Philadelphia. And I think it's probably the reason why I still hate the Eagles. And Scott Mitchell, and it was his big year. He threw for over 4,000 yards. I mean, Herman Moore, Johnny Morton, Brett Perryman, Barry Sanders. I mean, it was just like they were just throwing up points left and right the second half season. And I'm thinking, okay, I remember I had to work that day at a Big Boy, by the way, at the local Big Boy. My boss lets me out of work early. I drive home, I shower because I was a cook, and I don't want to sit there smelling like grease. I took like one of those 3-minute showers you take when you're in a hurry, and I make it just in time for kickoff. And they proceed to go out and just get thrashed. And it just wasn't, like you hear me say, like every once in a while, like you mentioned on the show, same old lines. No, this was just sheer anger. I'm like, okay, they need to score here. Okay, if they're within this many points at this point, they have a chance. And Philadelphia they just kept scoring. And that one made me so mad. And my buddy he was a big Scott Mitchell. He was really liking Scott Mitchell because Scott Mitchell was on his fantasy team. And Scott Mitchell was throwing up all these points. And I remember he was over at another friend's house where their football party started early, but I wanted to watch this game by myself. You know how I get sometimes. I called him up at halftime, and I'm like, hey, and I call my buddy Rob. I'm like, Rob, put Chad on the phone. And he's like, yeah, what's up? I go, and I remember yelling at the phone. I go, Scott Mitchell sucks. And he just yelled back, F off. And he hung up. That was the whole conversation. That was the whole conversation. Right
that's
there.
A classic Grifka. I could see that happening right now.
But that made me the most angry. My saddest one was when they lost to the Washington Redskins. And the Redskins were a dang good team. And, they won the Super Bowl. And it was one of those things like if the Lions would have won that game, the Super Bowl was played up in Minnesota, and it was in the Metrodome. And everyone's like, dome teams, they never win the Super Bowl, and blah, 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 because they got to play outside. And they went to Washington, and Washington just thrashed them. And there was a point come halftime. I mean, I know you get on me. You're like, there's two halves. But at that point at halftime, it's just like, this game's over. I mean, they couldn't stop them. They could barely move the ball. And it's just like, you kind of saw that, and it was just like so close to the Super Bowl. And that one, after that game, I just wanted to be left alone. I just went in my room and I just like sat on my bed in the dark. And my brother came in, and because we shared a room, he checked me. He's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll be fine." And I just like sat there in the dark for probably 2 hours and didn't even watch the second playoff game. Because I was just so disheartened and so sad that they didn't go to the Super Bowl, because the Lions were the first game of the championship weekend, and then Buffalo. I think Buffalo and whoever was the second game.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. Those are two good ones. I think that we as current Lions fans are still waiting for some of those moments, because as tough as some of these ball games are, like, we haven't had any in the last long time where there's a ton on the line and you lose a game like that. It is going to be a crusher. Hopefully we will experience a few more of those. Grifka, I know I said that was it before we take our break, but is there anything else you want to throw in about kind of your earlier years as a Lions fan? When we come back from the break, I want to ask you kind of where you're at now, what you think about some more, where they're at currently, things like that, to kind of finish us out. So anything else you want to give the people, or you want to say before we take our break about what it was like to be a Lions fan back in the day, and before we get some more current stuff?
I guess everybody hears me on the show, and I'll admit I get to this, the SOL Lions, I get to that point at times, and like you say, there's a point in the season where I just kind of like let them go, whatever. Okay, here's the next season. It'll be like game 8 or whatever like that. And what I really remember, what I kind of even miss, and it sounds kind of stupid, is just the innocence of liking football and watching the game. I'm to the point now where, it's just like, yeah, I get jonesed up to watch them, and me and you do the podcast, and I know you kind of make fun of me, no matter how bad the season is. Like, I want them to win no matter what. And you're like, oh, you got to use your head. If they lose, they'll get a better draft pick. And just I guess I kind of miss that, where it's just like every game they're on, I just miss the enjoyment of watching them, as opposed to taking it to heart, so much, and just being like I said, the highest of highs, the lowest of lows, and just being crushed. Where, when I was a kid, if they lost, okay, they'll play next Sunday, where now it's just like, oh gosh, it just wears on you for a week, and that's one thing I kind of miss, and it's I know I can't go back to that simply because I realize football it's a business more so than just a sport. So.
Well, good stuff, Grifka. Good stories, good memories. I mean, the reason we're doing this too is because, like, for all the grief and the fun we have, or when I get after Grifka, like, I've known him for a long time. He's a good guy, a good buddy of mine, a real legit Lions fan. No matter what he says or does, like, he loves this team. And like I say, I thought it was just fun for us, buddy, to talk it through, because I give you a lot of crap in a fun way, but like at the end of the day, I'm always like, man, I know Grifka, you're always in like my top couple friends where like I know genuinely wants his team to win big, wants them to play well, draft, do all the great things that we all want, even if your frustrations get to you. So good stuff, man. We will do what you often say, which is take a pause for the cause, and we will come back. And I got a few more things to throw at you before we finish out the Grifka exclusive interview here on the Detroit Koolaid Cast. So everybody, we'll be right back.
Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
Detroit Kool-Aid drinkers, we're back from the break. Thank you for listening to our sponsors. You are listening to the exclusive Grifka interview, where we're stripping back all of our gimmicks, our funny things we do every week, and the normal Lions off-season topics today. And we're just talking to Grifka, a little interview style, asking him some questions, getting his memories. So, Grifka, I want to start the second half with the Lions games that me and you have attended. I don't have it in front of me, but I want to say it was about 2011-ish, maybe 12, somewhere in that range, where, I'd had my tickets for a few years. The first few years I was splitting them up with other buddies. The first couple years, me and Hughes went to every game. And then, it just got to the point where I didn't need to be down at Ford Field for every game type of feel. So kind of ended up, checking in with you, and you were real gung-ho. Since then, I think we've always went to every opener, probably 8-9+ years in the running. I'd say we've been consistent with that. Got to do a few road trips and had some fun tailgates and experiences. So what are a couple things you've enjoyed from year after year, getting to kind of circle that game in red marker and say, man, I'm getting to go to the opener again? I mean, you enjoyed that. It's probably been different than your previous years, where, like you said, every once in a while you'd go, but didn't have that in, and also didn't have another buddy that would just consistently go with you like we have. So I know I've had some good memories and good times down there. How about you?
Oh yeah, it's been a blast, and a few things. The number of games that we went to, a few things that stick out to me. The biggest one, God, was it Lil Tim. And him rapping with you. I know we haven't brought him up in a couple of years, but Lil Tim, much love. That was the best part of that tailgate.
He's
old crappy tailgate.
He's out there doing his thing still.
Yeah. The Kansas City opener, where all the Ryan Suckup jerseys, which I'm like, how bad were the Chiefs where everybody had like a Ryan Suckup jersey? And Rory taking out Jamal Charles, and then not seeing Rory the rest of the game. That was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But then just was it the one year you had was it the little mic that was playing the Stafford? And you were playing, and like people were like looking around, like you would play when people walked by, and like people were like looking around dumbfounded, like they heard it but they didn't know where it was, and we were just sitting there laughing at that. But just the number of people that come by, and because where we sit, we're right there by Comerica Park, and it's just like a main thoroughfare over to Ford Field, so we just see tons of people. And just, people want screaming goal line and stuff like that. And you kind of poking fun at rival fans as they walk by, and the patented Dan Marino jersey that always shows up.
Oh man, that has been a good time, and like you said, I would always want for a big group of us, but like it always has been fun just to, hey, Grifka is one of my genuine buddies. I only keep a small group of genuine friends. There's a lot of people I know. I got a lot of acquaintances, but you're definitely a genuine buddy that I can always count on. And when we go to those games, it's always, I always have some hijinks. We always eat way too many calories. And, like I said, our win percentage is pretty good, I think, when we go down there. So that's been fun as well. Grifka, on this back half of your life where you've been a Lions fan, again, not too many, no playoff wins to speak of, a few appearances, a lot of hope every year going in thinking, this is the team, or, all these different players that we've all hung our hat on of, oh, they're getting it together. They got this, they got that. Like, talk us through a little bit of where you're at with that as far as, still hoping and believing, yet also year after year, I kind of hear you, getting a little bit jaded too in regards to, what you think, or if you think they'll get over the hump or they'll win. So where are you at with all that as a guy now later in his lifetime as a football fan, as a Detroit Lions fan?
Now, I know we've talked about this. I'm to the point now where I try not to get too high or too low with this team anymore. And I know for like the Cowboys playoff game, that Seattle Seahawks playoff game, even though I was like, even trying to get to that point where I was like, okay, I'm just going to be mellow. I remember after those games, my throat being hoarse from screaming at the television. And I remember points where I could just feel my heart racing, and you can feel like the blood, pumping into your skull. And I figured that can't be a good thing considering, it's a Sunday and, you're getting all worked up because you're sitting there eating, like, just kind of like you said, you're sitting down to like something that's usually full of salt. So that doesn't help the blood pressure. So, like I said, I'm trying to keep it there where stay healthy for my kids and not, die of a stroke watching a Lions game. So, I think they will eventually get there. It has to. I mean, I know the sport we do not speak of, but I'm a huge Cubs fan, and they won. So they have to get there. And I know when they do, it's going to be one of those things I'm just going to be jumping up and down. I might just run into the street, something like that. And I might get hit by a car simply because of the euphoria of it. I'm waiting for it. And I know come that year when they are good and they are in the playoffs, after every game, my throat's going to be hoarse. So yeah. I want to say to myself, stay mellow and it's okay. But I don't think it will be. I don't think I'll be able to hold myself in check.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, or that's what I tell you on the show is like, you can say you're not living and dying with this team, but like we've only been in the playoffs and been bounced in round one. So can you imagine like winning 2 playoff games and then having one more to get to the Super Bowl, or being in the NFC Championship game against one of the storied franchises? Like that just always goes through my head of just like what a moment that'll be versus what we've, like you said, I got the same way when we have those first round playoff games. You're just in on every play and whatnot, but we haven't even ramped it up yet, Grifka. We haven't even got to the good stuff, which, like I always say, the NFL is competitive, but I think it will happen as well, but it's going to be crazy when it does. Let's talk about the current squad or just these last few years. Like, what are your genuine thoughts? Like, there's been a lot of angst about this coaching staff. They've added some players. You look at their overall scope of the team. Like, what's your 5-year forecast with the current Lions organization? Meaning like owners, coaches, players, schemes. Like, overall, do you see good things in the future, even as early as this year, next year, or are you thinking that it's still going to be kind of lean here for a bit, in your opinion?
Gosh, I think if they're going to do something, it's got to be within the next couple of years, and simply with where they have Stafford at quarterback and Kenny Galladay, he's young. Young running backs. I mean, they got a lot of young talent, but if not, it might be one of those things. If I know there's a lot of Stafford haters out there, But I think it's got to be within the next couple of years, because I think if they go out and have to go get another quarterback, if they draft another young one, then you're kind of admitting it's another rebuild. And I know every once in a while that rookie quarterback jumps up and takes a team, but those are usually teams that, like, I know, was it Sanchez did it with the Jets, but that team was so stout on defense and so veteran laden with what they had there on their offensive line and other skill positions, that Sanchez was just more of a game manager. He wasn't asked to win games. So I can't see that happening with this squad, with where it's at. I think they're going to need Stafford to do it. So it's got to be within the next couple of years. If not, then you might have to be resigned to another rebuild, another few more years before they get a quarterback. That might do something. But I would like them to do something. I really want them to. I'm really hoping they do something. And Matt Patricia's guy, I believe he's got to show a little more this year. I mean, it's just we've all heard, wasn't good enough. What they did with Caldwell. I'm not saying Caldwell would have got us over the hump, but where this team is at, and I realize a lot of injuries, and I know that. But ultimately, the NFL's a win-loss sum game is what it is. So he's got to pull some magic out here, to make everything happen within the next couple of years.
What are a couple goals or dreams you'd have for the Lions in the next handful of years? Like, what are some check boxes you have, or some things like, man, I'm not getting any younger. Like, these are some exciting moments I'd like to have with this team, or these are type of players I hope that we get that I can watch every Sunday and feel proud to call them Detroit Lions. Like, what are a couple things that you at least, even if you don't think they have those yet, you keep thinking like, man, I really hope they get this, or really hope we can obtain this, or the team can accomplish X while you're still, not only a fan, but like before it gets too late to where you're not thinking, that anything of these things can happen. Like, what are some of those bucket list items you want for your Detroit Lions?
Well, I mean, besides a Super Bowl, I think the biggest thing would be is I want the Lions to be one of those teams, and I know everybody says this, nobody fears anybody, but in the NFL when you're taking on a great team and you just can't pencil a W in against them. And when you get there, it's one of those, greatest show on turf offenses that have just thrown up mad points. When we're talking those old Pittsburgh Steelers or old Baltimore Ravens defense, and like when they had Terrell Suggs and Ray Lewis and Ed Reed, those teams like, once you just get us a touchdown, we got a W. One of those things. That's what it just seems like the Lions have never had that. They've had those offenses that can put up points, but there's always something holding them back, either a quarterback or, there was Achilles heel that really would do it to him. But that would, what I really love to see, one of those teams just like the Lions. Oh, the Lions are playing this team, they're going to throw up 38 this week. Or, oh gosh, the Lions have one of those defenses like, oh, they're playing this team, 3 points, man. They can get, this team ain't scoring against this defense. That's something that I would really love to see.
So you rather have the kill 'em defense more so than an offensive team like the Chiefs and stuff nowadays?
They always say defense wins championships, but I think the way the NFL is going now, you almost need one of those high-flying offenses, because that's what – it sounds odd, but I think that's kind of what the NFL wants. They're putting their rules to benefit the offense more. So I think finding one of those tough, hard-nosed defenses that holds teams to 7 to 10 points, I don't know if the NFL really wants that for their teams. They want those teams that just go up there and throw mad points up. So, yeah, I think right now I would lean towards more one of those greatest show on turfs, never out of the game type offenses, as opposed to the stalwart. I'm not saying I want the defense to be Swiss cheese, but have a decent defense and just an offense that can go out there and it's like, okay, we can march down the field whenever we want.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. 2 other quick things and we'll finish this out. Grifka, again, I said we've been doing the show for quite a while. Been very happy that you came on board, and we've had a lot of fun with the show. We obviously have our disagreements. We drive each other nuts in different ways. But we're keeping this thing moving, man. We're still doing 2 shows a week and serving that Detroit Kool-Aid. Talk to the people a little bit about just, what you've enjoyed about this experience. Again, maybe some things that have been tough for you to jump on here on a podcast and talk Lions twice a week. I mean, me and you both aren't like phone guys. We're not calling a bunch of people, but we've been real consistent on here, jumping on and coming up with things to talk about and being diligent with it. So what have you liked about doing the podcast? What have some challenges been? What have you enjoyed from the fans? Like, just talk about the Detroit Kool-Aid Cast for a second and what you've got out of it.
Let me just start with the downside first, because I don't want to end on a downside. The downside is, like, when the team has those lean games like last year, it can get pretty difficult in here to try to talk about them and break down a game. And I know some of the fans don't want to listen to that. They know it's like, okay, the team's not very good. What can you say? We can try to put a positive spin on it, but that can be the most difficult thing to do. So, but what I've really enjoyed the most, actually, and I know I'm not on Twitter a lot, and I read but you're on Twitter much more than I am. And just even some of the, I don't want to say battles, for lack of a better term, when we do our solo shows and people come at me, I that's fine. I mean, and nobody has ever, come out, like I've said this to you, like nobody's ever come, once somebody calls you a name or just calls you stupid, and that's their whole argument, you've won, because they can't come back with something. But it's nice. Like, anytime I've got into that, it's always been cordial, and people, their point, my point, and I always thank them at the end, saying, hey man, good debate. I really appreciate how we didn't fall to the lowest level, because social media can be that way where people want to say a lot of things that they would never say to your face. And I'm glad none of our Lions fans, I always say that, there's certain teams I rip on their fan bases, Eagles. But Lions fans, the ones we come across, maybe you've come across different ones, but the ones that usually say something to me, they never come across that way. It's always a nice debate, and that's what it's been, pure class. So I really got to thank our listeners that take the time to do that and have a debate. That I've enjoyed that the most, that we're able to kind of see each other's points. Maybe if you don't agree with my point, you never debased yourself to the lowest common denominator and called me a name, and I won't do that to any of our fans either. So, and that's probably been one of my biggest joys, just the different people that, like you said, there's tons of Lions fans out there that never get their voice heard. So just to come back and being able to chat here and there, that's always the nice thing.
All right, good stuff. Nothing about the show itself?
Oh, the show itself? Me and you, like, there's times where we just, I don't want to say I don't get on tangents, but we just kind of get laughing at ourselves so much. And we just can't stop. And we realize how long we've went. And I know we always talk about, okay, let's shoot for this timeline. And there's sometimes we just kind of get going, and we're just having so much fun that you got to catch yourself. And I'll be like, oh, we went that long, and we don't even know. We're just BSing about football and just having a good time. That's probably my most enjoyable shows, where we do that.
Yeah, man. I just want to say personally, I really appreciated you making time for the show every week. I know it's sometimes, not your thing or not your favorite at times, but like I said, when we both make time for the show and we're fired up to talk football and talk Lions, like, there's nobody, I'd rather jump on and do the show with. I think it's fun that we come from different perspectives. I think we've been able to establish some really fun things for the fans, and like a lot of that's thanks to you and your humor, your ability to go with the flow. I mean, a lot of people would joke, but we basically have a couple bullet points that we talk about 2 minutes before we go live, and then I just say, all right, we're hitting that red button. Let's laugh, entertain, talk football, and enjoy. And it always does come out, much better than you could ever really write it on paper and stuff. So I just appreciate you from that realm. And like you say, it's really been fun, I think, for both of us to see all these different people all over the state, the country, and we even got people in other countries that are listening to the Detroit Koolaid Cast every week. So I just think it's been really cool what we've built from scratch, and like if this team ever takes off, like it'd just be crazy to hear me and you on some of these different shows, or just who knows what might hold for either of us in the future with some of this stuff. But like I say, I just really appreciate you, buddy, for coming on and for always rolling with the punches and talking football with me twice a week. It's been crazy. Now, Grifka, that wasn't the end of the show question, but this is. You've mentioned the word Super Bowl a few times. Grifka, lay it out for me. When and how is this going down? When the Detroit Lions are going to rise up, this city is going to go crazy because it is a football town. I don't care what is on the hockey arena or what other people have told you. This is a football town. It's an NFL town and then a college football town after that. When and how are the Detroit Lions going to make that run, get to the Super Bowl, and hoist that trophy for the city of Detroit, for the Detroit Koolaid Cast, for me, for you, for all the people that have lived and died with this team for years? Lay it out, get the people excited, maybe prognosticate a little bit to end the show here about how it's all going to go down.
I mean, I would like to say this year, but I think they could really make a run next year. I mean, if this team improves, they play that those meaningful games in December, like Martha Ford said, and they just get another draft class, and they're still Bob Quinn's done pretty well with the salary cap, where they're not totally bent over. They can still go out and get a couple pieces. Maybe next year could be that run where they really jump up and surprise people. I don't know if it'll be this year. I mean, but next year could be that. I mean, re-sign Kenny, maybe go get another wide receiver to pair with him, and they just get a couple more. That defense really comes along, to where it could be. Like, yeah, next year could be that year. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would take this year, but next year could really be that team where they just really make some hay, and get out there and start laying the lumber to teams and make that run.
Grifka, I love to hear that. That surprises me that you would have that type of optimism as well as so soon that you could see this team get into the promised land. But I've been waiting for quite a while, and I'm always optimistic, as you know. Grifka, this was an exclusive, man. Basically a 45, maybe nearly an hour sit down with you, just asking questions, hearing your thoughts and memories. Thanking you for what you've done, not only for the show, but just what you bring to the table. And like I say, it's been a crazy ride. So I think it's only appropriate to end it with something like this. Grifka, do you have anything else for the people?
Nope.
Grifka, that was your chance to break the note right there. You could have said thank you. You could have said something nice about me. I mean, that was your chance. I thought you might take it, but
I'm sorry, man. Derek, I appreciate you actually putting up with me. I know I drive you crazy sometimes with some of my talking points. And I know there's a couple times we left these things where we don't text or talk to each other for a couple days until we cool down, and then we're cool with each other again. So I appreciate you asking me and sticking with me, and all the fun that we've had. And I hope for a whole lot more episodes of this.
Well, thank you, Grifka. All the Detroit Kool-Aid drinkers out there, we will be coming back Friday with some heat. You're going to hear some Grifka bells. You're going to hear some sound bits. You're definitely going to hear me getting back to ribbing Grifka, him getting all flustered and upset, us laughing, us talking football. I'm sure he'll have some Lions 24/7 articles as well as some other topics that we'll get into. I cannot wait for that. This was a totally different show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you, Grifka. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. We'll check you on Friday right here on the Detroit Koolaid Cast. Take care, everybody. We're out.
Pack the bag, start the plane. This game is over. It is over. What a comeback by the Lions.
Drink it in, man.